It was a quiet Tuesday evening in October 1972, around 8:15 p.m. Inside the Silver Spur Roadhouse, no one, not the grizzled bartender, not the weary truck drivers, not the nervous teenager working her first shift, and certainly not the famous martial artist enjoying a simple meal, could have predicted the chaos about to unfold. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, creating a rhythmic drumming against the roof that lulled the patrons into a false sense of security. The warm glow of the tavern's lights offered a comforting contrast to the cold, dark Nevada night outside. But comfort, as everyone would soon discover, can vanish in an instant, replaced by a terror that no one had ever imagined experiencing in this humble roadside haven. For weeks, ominous whispers had traveled along the desolate Nevada highways like a ghost story passed from one frightened traveler to another. Truckers shared the warning over crackling CB radios, and diner waitresses passed it along in hushed tones to anyone who would listen. Travelers shared a grim warning: if the Iron Wolves motorcycle gang rolls into your town, get out. Don't argue, don't make eye contact, and above all, never, ever fight back. These weren't just thieves, they were predators of the human spirit, feeding on the fear they created wherever they went. The Iron Wolves didn't just take your wallet, they took your dignity. They reveled in the shame of a father forced to look away in front of his children, the humiliation of a husband who couldn't protect his wife. They fed on the helplessness of the elderly, mocking their frailty and weakness. They enjoyed watching strong men crumble and proud women tremble, finding amusement in the very thing that made them monsters. Their specialty was turning a peaceful sanctuary into a house of terror, leaving behind nothing but broken spirits and shattered confidence. But on this one rainy night, their reputation would meet its match, and the lesson they would learn would haunt them forever, echoing through the years as a reminder that even the mightiest bully can be brought low by a single act of courage. Outside, a fierce storm lashed against the empty highway, with lightning briefly illuminating the dark sky like a camera flash, capturing a moment of impending doom. The wind howled through the cracks in the old wooden building, rattling the windows and making the neon sign sway precariously on its rusty hinges. For miles, the only beacon of light was the flickering neon sign of a small, rustic tavern, the Silver Spur Roadhouse. It was a humble place, offering nothing more than warm meals, hot coffee, and a refuge from the road. The building itself had seen better decades, with its creaky floorboards and faded wallpaper, but it had a soul, a warmth that came from the people who gathered there, seeking comfort in each other's company. Inside, the usual patrons sought shelter, truck drivers finishing their meals after long hauls across the empty desert, factory workers chatting quietly about the day's labor and the challenges of making ends meet, a young couple celebrating their anniversary with a modest dinner and dreams of a better future, and an old war veteran lost in a photograph of fallen friends, his eyes reflecting memories that time could never erase. Near the kitchen, a 19-year-old waitress named Emily nervously straightened her apron for her very first shift. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from the anxiety of proving herself in a new job, wanting desperately to make a good impression on her first night. The bartender, an older man named Frank, offered a reassuring smile that had calmed countless nervous newcomers over the years. He had seen countless waitresses come and go over the decades, and he knew the nervous energy that accompanied a first night. "Relax," he said gently. "Everyone spills something on their first day. It's practically a tradition around here." Emily laughed softly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. She confessed, "I just hope nothing exciting happens tonight. I don't think my nerves could handle it." Frank's smile faded as he glanced towards the rain-streaked windows. A shadow passed over his face, a flicker of something dark and knowing that made Emily's stomach tighten. "So do I," he replied, a hint of dread in his voice that Emily didn't quite understand. She would understand soon enough when the nightmare walked through the door and changed everything she thought she knew about fear and courage. In a secluded corner, far from the quiet conversations and the warm glow of the fireplace, sat a solitary man. He had a bowl of steaming noodles, a small pot of tea, and a folded newspaper that he hadn't touched in several minutes. No entourage, no flashy attire, no desire for recognition. It was Bruce Lee, simply wanting to enjoy a warm meal in peace before continuing his journey. His movements were calm, his demeanor serene, his thoughts only on the food before him. He had traveled far and had learned long ago that true peace was found in small moments: a warm meal, a quiet corner, a moment of solitude away from the demands of fame and the pressures of a world that always wanted more from him. He had no idea that this peaceful evening would soon become one of the most defining nights of his life, a moment that would be talked about for generations, not because of his celebrity, but because of his humanity. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and a blast of freezing wind cut through the warm air like a knife, sending a chill down every spine in the room. The candles flickered wildly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. The country music played on for only a few more seconds before it was drowned out by the thunderous roar of motorcycle engines, 5 of them, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. Frank's face went pale, the color draining from his cheeks as if he had seen a ghost from his past. He didn't need to look outside. He knew exactly who had arrived. Emily, sensing his sudden fear, asked in a trembling voice, "Frank, what's wrong?" He whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing noise. "They're here." As he reached for the telephone beneath the counter, the front door flew open and 5 massive bikers stormed in like avenging demons, their presence sucking the warmth and safety out of the room. They were intimidating figures with heavy leather boots that left muddy footprints on the wooden floor, long beards that made them look almost animalistic, tattooed arms covered in crude symbols of violence, and steel chains rattling at their waists like warning bells. Rainwater dripped from their jackets, forming small puddles on the floor that seemed to spread like stains of fear. Their heavy footsteps seemed to shake the very foundation of the building, each step a reminder of their power. The room fell into a terrified silence, so profound that you could hear the rain outside and the rapid heartbeat of every person inside. Mothers pulled their children closer, shielding them from the menacing figures with their own bodies, willing to sacrifice themselves to protect their young. The old veteran quickly folded his photograph and slipped it into his pocket, as if protecting it from desecration. Everyone knew the nightmare that had just walked in, and everyone wished they were anywhere else on Earth. Leading the pack was Big Rex, a towering man nearly 7 feet tall, with scars crisscrossing his face like a roadmap of past violence and countless battles. His thick beard was streaked with gray, and his cold, lifeless eyes held no warmth, no humanity, only a hunger for fear and submission. He slammed a beer bottle onto the counter with such force that it shattered into a dozen sharp pieces, causing Emily to scream and jump back in terror. Frank didn't even flinch. He had seen this act before and knew that reacting would only make things worse. Big Rex smiled, revealing yellowed teeth, and with a flick of his hand, the music stopped and all conversation died. "This bar belongs to us tonight," he declared, his voice deep and gravelly, like stones grinding together in a landslide. The iron wolves spread out across the room like a plague, terrorizing the patrons with casual cruelty. One biker kicked over an empty chair, watching it clatter across the floor with a grin of satisfaction. Another grabbed a customer's steak and threw it against the wall, leaving a greasy stain that would take hours to clean. A third laughed as he emptied salt across an old veteran's meal, ruining it completely and mocking the man's age. No one resisted. No one argued. Fear had become a prison for their courage, locking away any thought of defiance. The customers lowered their eyes, hoping that if they remained invisible, the wolves would pass them by. But that hope was in vain. Rex then noticed the man in the corner who hadn't moved an inch, who hadn't flinched or looked away or shown any sign of the terror that gripped everyone else. He hadn't shown any sign of fear. That intrigued Rex, and intrigue quickly turned to anger. He sauntered over, and without a word, smashed Bruce's bowl of noodles onto the floor. The food scattered across the wooden planks, and the ceramic shattered into dozens of sharp pieces that glittered under the dim lights. Bruce slowly looked at the mess, then lifted his gaze to the giant biker towering over him. His voice was calm, almost gentle, as if he were talking to a misbehaving child. "I hadn't finished my dinner." The bar fell silent, then the bikers erupted in laughter that echoed off the walls. One tossed a raw egg to Rex, who caught it with a grin. He cracked it over Bruce Lee's head, and the cold yolk dripped down his hair and face, sliding across his forehead and down his cheek. The gang roared with delight, slapping each other on the back, as if they had just performed the funniest joke in the world. Emily covered her mouth in horror, tears streaming down her face. A little girl at a nearby table began to cry, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. The veteran quietly removed his glasses, knowing that something terrible was about to happen. But wait, if you think this is just another story about a fight, you're wrong. What happened next wasn't about punches or kicks. It was about a man who chose courage over anger, compassion over revenge. It was about someone who understood that true strength isn't about how hard you can hit, but about how many people you can protect. And what happened in the next few moments would change the lives of everyone in that room forever, especially the 5 men who thought they were invincible. Before we get there, I'm curious. Where are you watching from today? Drop your country and city in the comments below and let us know if you've ever witnessed a moment of unexpected courage that restored your faith in humanity. Bruce closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cold egg drip doce his face. When he opened them, there was no rage, only a quiet resolve. He picked up a white cloth napkin, carefully wiped the egg from his face and folded it neatly, placing it back on the table. He looked at Big Rex and in the same calm tone said, "You still have one chance. Pay for every broken chair, every shattered plate, and every frightened family. Apologize to the waitress and to that crying child, then leave." His voice carried no anger, no threat, just a simple, undeniable authority that seemed to come from somewhere deep within him, a place of absolute certainty. The bikers laughed again, mocking him with exaggerated gestures. Rex leaned in close, his foul breath hot on Bruce's face. "You think you scare me?" Bruce replied, his eyes steady and unblinking. "No, I think you're already scared enough." The accusation struck a nerve deep within Rex. His smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. One biker wrapped a heavy steel chain around his fist, the metal glinting under the dim lights. Another slowly drew a large hunting knife from his belt, the blade catching the light. A third walked to the front door and turned the lock, then pulled the curtains shut, declaring, "No witnesses. No one leaves until we are done." Big Rex picked up Bruce's teacup, the last unbroken item on the table. He looked at it for a moment, then dropped it on the floor without taking his eyes off Bruce. The porcelain shattered and the tea pooled on the wooden floor. Bruce sighed softly, a hint of sadness in his voice. "I liked that cup." The bikers jeered, but the old veteran, who had seen war and violence, whispered a quiet warning under his breath. "No, you boys are the ones in danger." He had recognized the calm in Bruce Lee's eyes, the calm of a man who had faced far greater threats and emerged victorious, the calm of someone who had stared death in the face and had not blinked. The tension was unbearable, every breath held, every heart pounding, but the real question wasn't who would win this fight. It was why someone would risk everything to protect strangers from bullies. What drove a man to stand up when everyone else had given up? And what happened in the next few seconds would shatter the Iron Wolves' perception of power forever, teaching them a lesson they would never forget. Big Rex cracked his enormous knuckles, the sound echoing across the bar like gunshots. He lunged forward, throwing a punch meant to kill, his massive fist aimed directly at Bruce's face. Bruce didn't flinch. He moved with a speed that defied belief, a blur of motion that seemed almost supernatural. It wasn't a retreat, but an interception. A sickening crack echoed as his elbow connected with the first biker's ribs, the sound of bone giving way. The man was thrown through a heavy oak table, wood exploding in all directions. The second biker came with a knife lunging straight for Bruce's chest. Bruce sidestepped, disarmed him with a flick of his wrist, and sent him crashing to the floor with a palm strike to the chest that knocked the wind out of him. The third biker attacked with a chair, swinging it over his head. Bruce's sidekick shattered it into dozens of splinters, and his spinning back fist left the biker sprawled by the jukebox, unconscious. The fourth biker, wrapped in his own chain, was knocked out cold before he could even land a punch. In just 9 seconds, 4 of the Iron Wolves were defeated, scattered across the floor like broken dolls. Only Big Rex remained, standing alone in the wreckage of his gang. He charged with a roar of rage and desperation, his massive fist aiming for Bruce's head. But Bruce was faster, more precise. A single, perfectly timed punch connected with Rex's jaw, and a sweep of his leg sent the giant crashing to the floor. The impact shook the entire building, glasses rattling behind the bar. The room was silent, the rain outside the only sound. The fight had lasted just moments, and not a single innocent person had been harmed. The families stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Bruce looked at the broken tables and the frightened families, then back at Rex. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of absolute truth. "I'm not disappointed because you cracked an egg on my head. I'm disappointed because you chose to frighten people who came here for peace." Rex, the man who had terrorized countless towns, had finally been defeated not just in body, but in spirit. He had met someone who didn't fight for ego, but for others, someone whose strength came from a place of compassion, not cruelty. But the most powerful moment of the night wasn't the fight. It was what happened after, when the fallen bikers got to their feet and faced the consequences of their actions. Because when the strongest man in the room helps the weakest, the entire dynamic of power shifts forever. Bullies are exposed for what they truly are, fragile souls hiding behind a mask of aggression, using fear to compensate for their own deep insecurities. The silence was heavy as the 5 fallen bikers slowly got to their feet, their arrogance gone, replaced by shame and confusion. For the first time in years, Big Rex felt powerless. He looked at the crying child and saw himself not as a king, but as a bully. He saw the fear in the little boy's eyes and realized it was the same fear he had seen in countless others, only this time he was the cause. He apologized to the families, to the old veteran, to Emily, whose first shift had turned into a nightmare. One by one, the Iron Wolves began to clean the mess they had made, replacing chairs and paying for the damage with cash they pulled from their pockets. They showed a sliver of humanity that no one had ever seen before, a glimpse of the men they could have been if they had chosen a different path. When Rex knelt to apologize to the little boy, the child held his teddy bear tightly and asked in a small, trembling voice, "Are you a bad man?" Bruce answered for him, his voice gentle but firm. "A bad man never admits he was wrong." Rex broke down, tears streaming down his face. As the bikers prepared to leave, Rex turned to Bruce and confessed, "I thought the strongest man was the one everyone feared." Bruce smiled warmly and gave him the truth that would change his life. "No, the strongest man is the one who makes everyone else feel safe." Rex reached up and removed the Iron Wolf's patch from his leather vest, holding it in his hands for a long moment. He looked at it, then quietly dropped it onto the floor. "I don't need this anymore." Without another word, he walked out into the quiet night, followed by his gang, their motorcycles starting up and fading into the Nevada darkness. The world inside the Silver Spur slowly returned to normal. Frank turned the jukebox back on, and soft country music filled the room again. Families laughed and returned to their tables, their fear replaced by relief. Emily brought Bruce a fresh bowl of steaming noodles, and the whole bar shared a moment of collective relief. Years later, no one remembered the broken tables or the shattered glass. They remembered the feeling of safety a quiet man had given them. Think about the last time you felt powerless. The last time a bully, a boss, or a stranger made you feel small and insignificant. It's a feeling that makes your stomach churn and your heart race, a feeling of helplessness that lingers long after the moment has passed, echoing in your mind and making you question your own strength. Now imagine if one person stood up and made that fear disappear, not through anger or violence, but through quiet, unwavering courage. That's the kind of strength that everyone deep down longs to have. The strength to not just fight, but to protect. The strength to stand up when others are afraid. It's a strength that goes beyond muscle, beyond reputation, and it's the kind that truly lasts, leaving an impact that echoes through generations. Because real strength isn't measured by how many people you can defeat. It is measured by how many people feel safe because you are there. And on that autumn night at the Silver Spur Roadhouse, 5 violent men learned that true power is not making people fear you, it is giving them a reason to smile again. Bruce Lee didn't just defeat 5 bikers, he restored hope, courage, and dignity to a room full of strangers. And that is a legacy that will never be forgotten. If this story of courage moved you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could use a reminder of what true strength looks like. Your support helps us create more cinematic stories every single week, stories that inspire, teach, and remind us all that even in the darkest moments, one person can make a difference.